daily news program from WorldLink TV presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The founder of the Hamas movement, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, says that they are willing to stop the military operations in Israel if Israel will take similar steps and stop their operations in the Palestinian territories. However, this will be a probation period which will last for several weeks. The president's office in Egypt announced that the Palestinian Prime Minister will attend the Sharm el-Sheikh summit on July 3rd. The U.S. president will also be attending. The Spanish foreign minister met with the Palestinian president and with Abu Mazen. Meanwhile, the Palestinian side reiterates the importance of pushing the peace process forward and implementing the roadmap without any amendments to it. Now to our correspondent in Ramallah, Majid Saeed.
Not too far from here, Israel is opening fire. Meanwhile, the Palestinians are meeting with the Spanish foreign minister to discuss peace and the roadmap, which Israel agreed to, but had reservations on 12 points on the map. However, the Palestinians dismissed the possibility of eliminating these points, since it would ruin the plan.
A Kurdish leader was elected head of the city council in Kirkuk, and an Arab leader was elected as his deputy. The council includes 30 members, divided into 5 committees. A third earthquake hits Algeria's capital, measuring 5.2 on the Richter scale. Meanwhile, massive public hysteria followed yesterday's earthquake, which measured 5.8. Now to Amr Abdelhamid in Algeria.
The search and rescue missions continue. After buildings collapse following the strong aftershocks that hit the Algerian capital and areas on the eastern coast. Meanwhile, the people of these inflicted areas are nervous and worried, fearing another earthquake.
This is the end of the news in brief.
Hundreds of Iraqis demonstrated in the city of Al-Mosul, protesting the bad living conditions after their food coupons ran out. Also, demanding the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from their country. The protesters held pictures of Saddam Hussein and threatened to carry out martyrdom attacks against the coalition forces, such as the recent attack in Al-Fallujah, if their demands are not met. Now, to a report from our correspondent in Al-Mosul, Mohammed Makhtari. 2 months were enough to deplete the patience of these protesters who ran out of food coupons. They have been waiting too long, and now they are demonstrating in front of government buildings and the coalition forces. It is their only way of expressing their suffering.
Brother, it has been 2 months since the Americans came, and our situation has not improved at all. On the contrary, poverty has increased and crime has increased. If they don't give us our rights, then we will reap havoc in everywhere, like our brothers in Fallujah.
The protesters demanded the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from Iraq, while chanting slogans supporting Saddam Hussein and blessing the Al-Fallujah attack.
Every Muslim can be a martyr, and hunger can lead to that. These massive crowds here don't support Saddam Hussein, but they are willing to sacrifice the most precious to survive.
The U.S. General Command in northern Iraq promises the protesters that they will solve their problems, saying that this demonstration is a symbol of democracy.
The Vice Mayor and I just had a good meeting.
The deputy mayor and I just had a good meeting and agreed to look into the demonstrators' problems and solve them through Baghdad. There are few pro-Saddam protesters in this demonstration. However, this is a symbol of democracy, which was not present during Saddam's regime.
The coalition forces were expecting this demonstration, thus reinforcing their troops in northwestern Iraq. Currently, the people of Al-Mosul are angry and frustrated. However, the situation may deteriorate if their demands are not met. Mohammed Makhtari, Abu Dhabi TV, Al-Mosul, in northern Iraq.
The appointed American diplomat and civil administrator, Paul Bremer, guaranteed that the Ba'ath Party will not be given any leadership positions in any Iraqi governmental sector. Iraqi civil institutions welcomed the move, and massive demonstrations reflected their support of this decision. Moreover, the capturing of previous party officials has made it easier to settle old scores between members of the organization in absence of any judicial and governmental institutions. The Ba'ath Party, the Iraqi Arab Socialist Party, ruled from this place for 40 years. Nothing is left from the ruins of this period except a statue of the party's founder Mikhail al-Aflak and a mural waiting to be torn down. Ba'ath symbols remain outcast in the streets and are often subjected to revenge attacks. But the reality is that this hatred sometimes transforms itself into something else. A settling of scores through human extermination, like what happened to Daoud al-Qaisi, who spent many years as the head of the Iraqi Artists Association.
He was shot without warning. The man came to this neighborhood. He walked with him inside this yard. He greeted him and then pulled out his gun and fired. You see in the area the bullets were fired in front of the living room and entered inside.
Every institution and association in Iraq was led by the Ba'ath Party. Some of them have disavowed their former beliefs. They understood their lessons. Now they sit and wait.
The officials understood the situation. In conclusion, those who supported the officials of the previous regime have withdrawn on their own. Those elements that are still left are calling for a new movement of music in Iraq.
The political parties are benefiting from the most current situation, who find an opportunity for retribution against the Ba'ath Party and its symbols. They compete to control former party buildings and transform them into their headquarters, like this building, home to the National Union of Kurdistan. The campaign against the Ba'ath includes many different people and comes from every place. In addition to the political parties, various movements in society organize protests. This demonstration was arranged by the prominent Shiite leadership called Al-Hawza Al-Ilmiya, whose goal is to change the previous reality to one which eliminates the Ba'ath from having any presence in everyday life.
We called for a peaceful, clean, and respectful demonstration to reject these people from having any positions, because they got used to stealing and attacking Islam and all the citizens of Iraq, not just Muslims. Even if you ask the Christians, what did the Ba'ath do for you during the last 35 years? Nothing. That was how they treated all the people of Iraq.
Today, eliminating the Ba'ath Party from major positions in Iraq is a demand from all political factions in Iraq. This is a demand which will provide an opportunity to settle the old scores between these people. The Syrian Foreign Minister Farouk al-Shara called for the expansion of the roadmap to include Syria and Lebanon. He stated that his country is ready to resume the peace negotiations with Israel from the point where they left off in the year 2000. Shara''s presence at the Euromed Forum at the Greek island of Crete, along with his Israeli counterpart Sylvan Shalom, drew much attention. Sharon welcomed the resumption of negotiations with Syria as long as it brings an end to what he calls terrorism.
The Syrians wish to resume peace negotiations with Israel from the point where they left off in the year 2000, based on UN Security Council Resolution 242 and 338, in addition to the Madrid Peace Conference in 1991 and the principle of peace for land. From Syria's perspective, these issues are crucial to the resumption of any peace negotiations. The firm Syrian position was accompanied by an unprecedented move on behalf of Syria since 3 years, reflected in its participation in the Euromed conference, and also attended by Israel. Previous Syrian-Israeli negotiations were obstructed by the failure of the American and Syrian presidents to reach an agreement at the Geneva summit. At the time, Washington blamed President Hafez al-Assad for failing to take advantage of this historical opportunity. However, Syria demanded what Rabin had promised to the American administration, but the Barak government hesitated to give the necessary concessions to forward the peace process. There are four significant issues for resuming the peace negotiations, the most important one being the Syrian demand for a complete Israeli withdrawal from the Golan Heights, which is rich in water resources. However, Israel suggested adjustments to the borders that were defined in July 1967 to borders which allowed Tel Aviv to keep the northeastern coast of Lake Tiberias, guaranteeing total Israeli control over all the water resources. But the Syrians want to share these resources. The two countries still disagree on security arrangements, including the establishment of an early Israeli warning center in the mountain of Sheikh under American supervision. They also differ on how to exchange security information and establish a demilitarized zone at the borders with a limited Syrian military presence and weaponry. In exchange, Syria is expected to agree on peace, normalization, and diplomatic relations. In 1996, Syria had accepted these demands on the condition that their fulfillment of these demands will only begin during the final stage of Israeli withdrawal from the entire Golan Heights. Furthermore, the two countries discussed the period of time necessary to complete the peace negotiations and withdrawal. While Damascus stipulates that the withdrawal be completed within a year at most, Israel requests 4 to 6 years. Previously, Syria stated that there will be no hope for peace, no matter who governs Israel, the right or the left, unless Israel changes its mentality internally. Considering that the Israelis insist on resuming the negotiations without preconditions, thus far it is unknown whether anything is going to change or what Damascus sees on the horizon.
Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas said he will meet Israeli he will meet Israeli Minister Ariel Sharon on Thursday in occupied Jerusalem.
Arab, European, American, and reluctant Israeli officials are all engaged in diplomatic rounds to try to put on track the so-called roadmap to peace between Palestinians and Israelis. Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas said after talks in Ramallah with Spanish Foreign Minister Anna Palacio that he will meet with the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon on Thursday in occupied Jerusalem. Israeli officials earlier refused to confirm Palestinian reports of a meeting Wednesday or Thursday, a move which set doubt about Israel's real intentions to implement the plan. Abbas had dismissed Israel's attempts at reshaping the plan in an interview published by the Haaretz Daily. He stressed that Washington had made it clear the roadmap had to be implemented the way it was submitted to both parties a month ago. He said, quote, "We don't accept each side picking and choosing only those specific elements that are convenient for them in the roadmap." Some European officials were quick to stage a visit to the occupied territories to keep the roadmap on the right track. The Palestinian Authority says an Abbas-Sharon meeting would help set the tone for the summit expected next week with President George W. Bush. Jordanian Information Minister Mohammed Adwan said his country will host an Aqaba, the three-way meeting in presence of King Abdullah II. But the White House played down Adwan's statement. Bush spokesman Eric Fleischer said the meeting is under active consideration. Bush may also meet Arab leaders for a separate summit in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. The state-run news agency MENA reported earlier that a summit between Bush and Arab leaders would be held on June 4th and followed by the Bush-Sharon-Abbas meeting the next day. But Palestinian Foreign Minister Nabil Shad, who attended the Euro-Med summit in Crete, said if Sharon came to upcoming planned talks this week without implementation steps and with reservations and fears, then the process would not be able to start. Israeli government had accepted the plan only after it stipulated that Palestinian refugees should not return to their land and after rejecting to free settlement building in the self-ruled Palestinian territories. However, Lebanon and Syria, which took in hundreds of thousands of Palestinians during Israel's occupation, expressed concern of the reservations. Lebanese Foreign Minister Jean Abed said the Palestinian uprising and resistance was basically the outcome of the refugee problem and accordingly is always capable of turning into violence unless dealt with. EU Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana said the quartet would meet early next month to work out the next steps forward in implementing the plan. Greek Foreign Minister George Papandreou said the EU would continue to provide financial and political support to the process, and German Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer said it was Washington which was in the driving seat to ensure the success of the plan.
U.S. occupation forces remained under attack in Iraq. On Wednesday, a U.S. Ground Forces spokesman said that 9 more U.S. soldiers were wounded in the previous 24 hours, but none of their injuries was serious or life-threatening, adding that there are still elements of the former regime who are trying to disrupt U.S. efforts in the country.
On the wake of intensified Iraqi attacks against U.S. occupying troops, U.S. Administrator in Iraq Paul Bremer said that occupying forces will find days that they will take multiple casualties, as they did since the beginning of this week. But he said that this does not indicate things are getting worse, while calling for patience. In the latest attacks, 2 U.S. soldiers and 2 unidentified attackers were killed and 9 other American troops injured in a firefight early on Tuesday in the troubled town of Fallujah, where locals said that a U.S. helicopter was also shut down. U.S. military considers Fallujah town a hotbed of support for Saddam Hussein's fallen Ba'ath Party.
They come to Fallujah every day at 11 and they block the road. And they will not allow anyone to pass through, even sick and injured people. They insult and humiliate the people, and they stop them on the street and make them lie down on the floor and search them, even women, and they ask why they are carrying money with them. This has gone on for a week. After that, the fighters, helped by some Iraqis, came in here, and a battle took place which lasted from 1 until 5 a.m.
The MiddleEastOnline.com website on Tuesday posted a statement in which the so-called pro-Saddam General Command of the Iraqi Armed Resistance and Liberation Forces claimed responsibility for the Fallujah attack. It said the attacks were carried out by what is called Al-Farouk Brigades and members of the Ba'ath Party. However, the authenticity of the letter could not be confirmed. Meanwhile, Bremen's announcement of postponing the formation of an Iraqi interim government has raised the concerns among Iraqis over the deteriorating political and administrative situation amid the absence of law and security, as well as the total absence of government establishments. Iraq is still witnessing actions of organized destruction of vital government establishments under the eyes of U.S. occupation forces. The latest of these actions was torching ablaze the Ma'moon Communication Center on the outskirts of Baghdad.
We hold the American army full responsibility. They should have protected all the ministries and departments from the moment they occupied Baghdad.
The slow pace of security procedures and salary payments have mounted a sense of mistrust in the steps taken by the U.S. occupying forces and led Iraqis to believe that these forces are implementing a plan aimed at destroying their country.
Liberating Lebanese land from the Israeli occupation was not to be achieved except for the many martyrs who offered their lives and the many detainees in Israeli prisons who are still paying for this victory. The following report relates the story of 4 martyrs who were buried alive while in detention.
Detention is an Israeli policy that was practiced since the very first day of Israeli occupation of Lebanese lands. Israeli occupation troops tightened their grip on our territories by installing many detention centers in various regions in southern Lebanon. On July 14, 1982, Israeli occupation troops erected the Ansar detention camp, one of the largest Israeli detention centers. Tens of thousands of Lebanese and Arab detainees were jailed in that prison, where the occupation troops have mastered all kinds of torture. Torture was untolerated. The detainees staged 2 uprisings inside this very prison on July 17th and September 28th of the same year. Israeli barbarism reached its peak when Israeli forces buried 4 of the detainees alive in a valley known as Wadi Jahannam, or the Hell Valley. The detainees had previously dug a tunnel in that area to run away from the camp. The tunnel was their shortcut to heaven. The 4 martyrs are Ahmed Shaitu, Ibrahim Darwish, Ibrahim Khadra, and Abbas Ballita. In that detention center they met, they were united with their one cause. Their pure blood was mixed with the nation's soul and scented these hills with the fragrance of freedom.
دكتور مبسوط يعني هو أعز ولد كان حي يعني الحاج إبراهيم كان كثير طيب كثير كان مليح، ولكن بأثناء صار الأحداث قلت حالي أنا مش فايق هذا، مبسوط كثير بالانتصار وبهالجو اللي صار.
نحن بنحس إنه هن الأبطال، هن اللي حرروا الجنوب، ونحن بنشعر إنه هن بيرفعوا لنا راسي.
وقت التحرير سبحان الله، مثل أنا بالكلمة يعني هي متطلوطة قلتي إنه لما السيد حسن وشباب المقاومة حرروا الجنوب، حست كل أم شهيدة رجع على البيت.
Years have passed on this incident, but time could not erase it from our memory. The liberation could turn the tears of separation to tears of joy with martyrdom and victory, but the joy of liberation remains incomplete until the hope of freedom of detainees is turned to a virtual reality.
British Prime Minister Tony Blair has arrived in Kuwait on the first leg of his tour of the Gulf states following the US-British war on Iraq. Blair confirmed he would make a visit to Iraq to thank British troops there, becoming the first foreign leader to visit the country since the war. He said there's a lot of work still to be done to put things right in Iraq. The United States dismissed media reports that 4 U.S. soldiers were killed in Iraq when a helicopter came down. The Pentagon said it had no information on any missing or crashed U.S. helicopter in Iraq, but it said checks on the reports were being made. In Baghdad, U.S. troops have detained a senior Palestinian diplomat outside his office, accusing him of possessing illegal weapons. Charge d'affaires Najah Abdurrahman and 4 Iraqis were stopped and handcuffed by U.S. soldiers outside the Palestinian mission. U.S. soldiers said the men were held for carrying 3 unlicensed weapons. And a new council in the key northern Iraqi oil city of Kirkuk elected a Kurdish mayor in a move which left local Arab and Turkmen leaders concerned about Kurdish political domination. Iran denied U.S. charges it had secret nuclear facilities or links with Al-Qaeda and accused Washington of double standards in the war on terror. U.S. officials have increased pressure on Tehran in recent days, accusing it of taking insufficient steps to root out members of Al-Qaeda in Iran who may have played a role in the May 12 suicide bombings in Saudi Arabia. U.S. officials said recent arrests of some Al-Qaeda members in Iran had not quelled U.S. concerns that senior Al-Qaeda members were still in the country. The criticism came as an Iranian opposition group claims Iran has developed 2 additional nuclear facilities outside Tehran. We get more in this Reuters report.
While 200 Iranian Americans demonstrated outside the White House, the Bush administration, after postponing a senior-level meeting on Iran policy, said diplomatic contact with Iran will continue. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell said contact with the Islamic Republic had not stopped, as some reports had suggested.
We disapprove of their efforts to develop a nuclear capability, and our policies are well known, and I'm not aware of any changes of policy of the kind that have been speculated.
Senior Bush administration officials have issued new warnings to Iran not to interfere in the reconstruction of Iraq. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was one of those with strong words for Tehran.
It's a country that has been unhelpful with respect to Iraq.
White House spokesman Ari Fleischer said the arrests of several suspected al-Qaeda members announced by Iran on Monday did not quell concerns about the presence of members of Osama bin Laden's network.
Steps that the Iranians claim to have taken in terms of capturing al-Qaeda are insufficient. It is important that Iran live up to its commitments and obligations not to harbor terrorists.
An exiled Iranian opposition group, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, said it had fresh evidence that Tehran was developing nuclear weapons, 2 of which were partially operational. Iran says its nuclear ambitions are limited to producing electricity and has told Washington to stay out of what it said were internal affairs.
Foreign ministers from states membering the Organization of the Islamic Conference, OIC, along with a great number of officials representing the regional and international circles on Wednesday, attended the 30th OIC Foreign Ministerial Session held in Tehran.
In an opening address, President Khatami brought up huge potential and capabilities of Muslim countries and said the only way to settle the problems Islamic nations are facing is to close ranks and take heed of divine instructions. The president said any viewpoint which justifies discrimination, hatred, violence, and suppression runs counter to the spirit of Islam, adding powers which trample independence, national sovereignty, and popular demands, in fact oppose freedom and civility. The president further said Muslim nations are duty-bound to contribute to efforts to restore the Palestinian freedom and right to self-determination, underlining Muslims have a duty to throw their weight behind the Palestinian resistance now that the Zionist regime is carrying on with its massacre of Palestinians and occupation of their territories. The president described the Palestinian resistance as a perfect example of freedom fighting in the face of state-sponsored terrorism. The defenseless people of Iraq are in dire need of the support of Muslim nations and governments, President Khatami said, adding the troubled people of Iraq rightfully expect to take charge of day-to-day administration of their own affairs as soon as possible. He called for the UN to play a central role in political and economic reconstruction of Iraq, adding Tehran believes a coalition to promote justice-based peace should replace efforts to expand war all around the world. Iran's Foreign Minister Kamal Kharvazi, who chairs the event, said the Middle East should be cleared from weapons of mass destruction indiscriminately. He called for Middle East free of weapons of mass destruction, saying Israel is the only regime in the region that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Mr. Kharvazi further said Israeli weapons of mass destruction are a serious threat to the Middle East peace and stability. The Iranian foreign minister added Muslim countries should be in unison in calling for the international community, particularly those countries which have influence on Israel, to apply pressure on the Zionist regime to end its policy of manufacturing and stockpiling W&D. Secretary General of the Islamic body, Abdul Wahid Belghazi, told the gathering the Muslim world is at a sensitive point in time facing a number of big obstacles. He urged Muslim nations to unite and make use of modern methods in their dealing with such challenges. He said the Muslim world should seriously respond to biased attacks aimed at painting a distorted picture of Islam. Belghazi described Iran as a strong bulwark of Islam, adding Muslims need to seriously deal with overt and covert threats aimed at some Islamic countries such as Iran and Syria. Arab League Secretary General Musa said Iran's proposal to hold dialogue among civilizations proves Muslim nations are determined to promote dialogue and understanding with others, but some countries have unfortunately opted for the language of force. Post-Saddam Iraq and the fate of war-stricken Iraqi people are at the heart of the conference. The participants are fully aware that the Islamic world can play a crucial role in restoring stability in the Middle East.
Unity, harmony, and solidarity within the OIC should not be just in words, but it should be in deeds as well.
We cannot ignore what is going on in Iraq, so this is going to be the top of the agenda.
Expectation is high from the event, and countries present their own proposal to work out a way towards a stable and war-free Islamic world.
MOSAIC is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,